Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, a steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
Donnie Barnett, 73 years old, and I was employed from July 1, 0800, 1967 to July 1, 0800, 1997. 30 years to the second, and enjoyed every bit of it. I retired as a captain. I was born and raised in Elkin, North Carolina, moved to Greensboro when I was in the 4th grade, and lived here all my adult life until I retired. I graduated high school at 17, joined the Army 1 month later, served 3 years in the Army, E5 when I got out. 13 days later, I joined the fire department. At the time, it was just a job till I found something else possibly. I had never thought about being a firefighter. I don't know that I was crazy about seeing fire trucks going down the road. Like I said, I'd been in the military for 3 years, got out, and 20 years old, hard to find many jobs. And talked to Chief Fouché, and he said, well, you're the right age, but he said, you know, you're ready for the draft. And I said, well, I just got out 10 days ago. And that was my background investigation. He said, you're hired. Process of my job was, went for an interview with Chief Fouché. He was the deputy chief at that particular time, and went through an interview with him, and they were going to hire a class, but they didn't have enough for a training class, so I was assigned to Station 7, not knowing anything about the fire department and what to expect. My starting salary at that time was $400 a month. Okay. I had just got out of the Army making $246.90, and so I felt like I was really making some money. In my training class, we had about 12 to 14 guys: Earl Price, Charlie McCoy, Joe Daniels, Archie Hill. Going through training, everything was not easy, but I adapted to it real good. Alphabetically, I was first in the class to do everything, so had to slide ropes first, had to climb ladders first, this, that, and the other. But everything, I enjoyed it. My dad had always told me, with the military and with the fire department, if your training instructor shows you what to do, if they can do it, then you can do it. Some of the funny stories in training was we had a couple of guys that were being resent back through training to brush up on some of their skills. And we had a fun group of guys, and like I say, didn't play too many practical jokes on people. So, you know, we kept that down to a pretty minimum. When I first went into training, I told my wife that I was going to do the very best I could. And at that particular time, you had 90 days to re-enlist without losing your bonus or your rank. And so I told her, you know, say a few prayers, and if I make it, I'll be there. And if not, you know, I was planning on probably going back in the military. But I did come through training, did real good.
Where was you stationed?
Station 7 was my first duty assignment without having been through training. And nobody told me that when you hang a left out of the firehouse, better hold on as you go across the railroad tracks, because I was trying to put my coat on, and the guy, at that particular time, you rode the back of the truck, and you didn't have harnesses to hold you on and everything. So I was trying to sling one arm around and get it on. And about that time, we hit the railroad tracks and almost came off the back of the truck. Well, the back of the truck at that time, you had your hands up over your head. You couldn't see the truck, front of the truck. You didn't know where you were going, what you was doing. Didn't know if you was getting ready to hit a car or not. So you were just hanging on for dear life for the most part.
Yeah.
At that time, you rode the back of the truck, rain, sleet, snow, hail, whatever. They were convertibles at that particular time when I came on. So when you did get to drive, it was kind of crazy that we had windshield wipers and an open cab truck, so you'd be, getting wet and, as you're driving down the road and the wipers, I don't know what they were doing, but they were doing something. Mick Newnham was my first captain at Station 7, and he was a bear, and he was a hell of a firefighter. And at that time, it wasn't cool to wear your air mask all the time. Be going inside of a building and you'd hear him say something to you, and you look around and he's in there knee deep in smoke like you were, but he was without his mask on. And, I just said, well, if that's what it takes, I ain't so sure I can handle that part. Howard O'Farrell was the driver at Engine 7 at that particular time. Steve Faust was on another shift. J.W. Manus was at the back of not sure which truck he rode, but he was at Station 7 too. Mm-hmm. Later in my career, nicknames was like Barney, not Barney the purple animal, but Barney Fight, because at my freshman year in high school, I was 4'11" and 95 pounds. So my brother-in-law called me Barney. And so Barney was a nickname. And some of the funny pranks that went on at the station, one particular guy, he loved to put black shoe polish on the telephone receiver, and he'd give you a call. You'd pick it up, and you didn't realize it, but you was covering yourself in black shoe polish. Mm-hmm. So he always wore headsets when he was listening to his music. So I got the headsets and put black shoe polish all around both ears, and he's just laying there listening to music, moving around. And when he took it off, he didn't really think it was all that funny then, but that was one of the things. Another one was run wires through the ceilings to drop baby powder on people while they were laying in bed asleep, and short sheeting people. We had a couple of people that we would tie up with ropes while they were laying there in bed, and we'd tie them up, and then about that time the fire call come in and didn't have time to untie them, just leave them and get going. Short sheeting, for the ones that don't know, didn't serve any time in the military, was they would make up the bed and the sheet would only go, they'd cut it off about knee high, and then that way when you got ready to put your legs in the bed, you couldn't put your feet all the way to the bottom because the sheet was short sheeted. Another funny prank that turned out to not be too funny for the individual, but at Station 4, we had a gentleman that was getting ready to get married, and so everybody had talked about what they was going to do to initiate him, and he threatened, he said, there ain't nobody going to do that to me. Well, we had a battalion chief that had a set of hair clippers. So about 5 of them held him down and gave him a nice trim job. And then they had some kind of purple ointment. I forget what it was called. The purple ointment, they drew a circle on this and an arrow pointing down. And he was getting ready to go on vacation to the Caribbean, so that stuff didn't wear off for at least 8 to 10 days. So, you know, that battalion chief that loaned the clippers out got a little bit of trouble, but the union was. But at that time, we had non-collective bargaining. At that time, the leadership of the group, I wasn't necessarily against the union, but I wasn't in favor of the union because there was nothing that we could do. We, you know, we didn't, like I say, we had a no strike clause. And so I didn't belong to the union. I didn't necessarily go against the union. But going back to the starting pay, after training, Channel 2 News came out and interviewed me and my wife, and I had Jeff, my oldest son. He was about 18 months old, and I'd stand him up in my palm of my hand and walk around the room with him, and he'd die life. And so when I got back to the firehouse, they'd interviewed me the night before, and they said, didn't you know that we're fighting for more money? And I said, no, not really. And he said, well, you know, you made it sound like you was making a ton of money. I said, well, $250 to $400. I said, that was a pretty damn good pay raise for me. So had I known, I probably wouldn't have put it that way. But, you know, it at least expressed the truth that, you know, it was good money starting out. Normal day at the firehouse was starting off, getting there at 8 o'clock, put your equipment on the truck, and then most of the people would fix breakfast before they started cleaning up. Take about 30 minutes to do that, and then you start sweeping, mopping, dusting, vacuuming, make up all the beds, scrub the floors when it was scrub day, mow the yards, wash windows in the station, clean the stove and refrigerator, do all that, and then somebody would have to go out and buy groceries, and then somebody would cook. The general public would see you out buying groceries, and they'd say, well, city's really splurging for y'all today having steaks. And I said, well, we have to pay for our own meals, so if we have steaks, it's because we chose to have it. And at the firehouse, everybody took turns cooking, and if nobody, or if somebody didn't know how to cook, they were an assistant for a while. They'd go to the store and buy groceries. They may go to the store 4 or 5 times in one day to get stuff. And then if we didn't allow grudge meals. In other words, if you couldn't cook, you couldn't just throw something on the table and say, well, there, eat it. Because if you didn't, then we'd make you go ahead and cook again the next day. And so you cooked till you got it right, and everybody took their turn. One of my favorite dishes to cook at the firehouse, I fixed lasagna. Later in my years, one of the top chiefs would call me and tell me he needed a PR meal, and I'd invite the city manager, the mayor, city council, fire training. I'd call the mayor and I'd say, I'm going to have lasagna and I'd like to know if you'd like to come out and eat with us. And he said, well, I'm busy that day, but I'll remind me the next time. And I said, well, I'll let the mayor know that you're not able to come. Yeah, oh, is the mayor going to be there? And I said, yeah. He said, well, yeah, I can make it. So I'd hang up from him and then call the mayor real quick and say, wanted to invite you out for dinner. Well, I'd love to, but I'm busy that day. I said, well, I'll let the city manager and the fire chief know that you're not going to be able to make it. And then called the city council, same thing with them. If they'd all been sitting together, I'd probably been up the creek without a paddle, but you know, sometimes you had to do what you had to do. Well, when I came on, and most of my first part of my career, slept in a bay with 8 or 10 other guys, and later they have come around to making cubes and stuff like this, and this was probably brought on more for the fact of the female firefighters having their own privacy versus sleeping in a big dorm with all the guys. The one thing at that particular time that I didn't think was right, the lady firefighters got a captain's room so they would have privacy, you know, in their own bathroom. And that was something that most of us had to work for, was to get that other room. And so for two captains, they had to share so a female could have a room. It didn't seem right, but at the same time, you know, I respected her privacy and all like that, but I enjoyed working with the lady firefighters that I had on my company. Well, from the time I came on to now, I'm sure the daily topics probably different, but later in my career, we used to come in and, you know, I'll use the analogy of a barber friend of mine. He made fun of us being a firefighter because he said we didn't ever do anything. And I said, well, when I came in here, you didn't have anybody cutting their hair. I said, what did you do before somebody got here? Well, I swept and I mopped and I dusted. And I said, so you cleaned up just like we did. And so later we had test hydrants, building inspections, pre-plans. So we got away from the sitting around the firehouse deal to actually being out in the public doing different things. And I'm sure that there are more than that now. But I think, you know, about the 10 to 15 year mark, I think that's when we really got out into the public side and did more stuff. And I'm sure that today's firefighters wear many different hats, doing different things, still staying in the public eye. When in my younger years on the fire department, we'd have retirees come by, and everybody would sit down to talk for a few minutes, and gradually, one by one, everybody would sort of disappear, and one person was left sort of sitting there babysitting, talking to the person, trying to, you know, make them feel comfortable being there. And now when I go to fire stations, I find myself, you know, I walk in, I don't recognize anybody there, and it's a major difference when you know what it was like while you were young, but walking into that firehouse 20-some years later and nobody recognizing you or care, you know, it makes you feel like what you did wasn't really recognized and wasn't important. Well, I mean, you know, you can't make somebody sit down and talk to somebody. I mean, you know, it's nice that somebody sits there and talks with them for a few minutes until you can get back to work. But, you know, it's always nice if the younger guys welcome them, especially if they say that they're a retired firefighter, that, you know, or to sit down and just ask a few questions, ask them what it was like, what did you do, you know, when you first came on. I'm sure one of my first fires that I remember were down in the projects off of McConnell Road, going down through there in the evening time, and you could just see the glow of the fire at a distance. You know, it looked like the sun coming up almost. And you know, I was driving and my right leg was just jumping up and down, and my captain spit the back out the window and said, "Settle down, boy, you got it." And you know, but it really, the adrenaline was, I mean, the accelerator wasn't jumping up and down, but I couldn't hold my leg still on the gas. It just an exciting feeling. When I first came on, they didn't have the QRVs, they didn't have the squads that they currently have. They had, I think, maybe one or two squads in different parts of town. I was at Station 5, first time I, you know, rode any medical calls, stuff like that. And, you know, that's always a different adventure every day. And, you know, having to deal with medical emergencies. One of the calls that I went on was one of my dad's best friends, and he was laying there, he had a heart attack, and we rolled him over and did CPR, and fortunately enough, we brought him back. Before he left on the ambulance, he recognized me and city is happy to see me there. Playing a part in saving somebody's life, you really don't know the feeling at that particular time. You're excited, you're doing the job that you're doing, and you don't really sit back and think about it. But then when you've got a day or so to think about it, it makes you really feel good that you did serve and help somebody. You're not going to be able to save everyone, but I always told the squad guys that in my opinion, I didn't think it was good for them to go to the hospital to visit the patient, because if they're in the hospital, you got them out of what situation they were in. You got them in the back of the ambulance, and that's it. To me, that was saving somebody's life. If they died after they got there, that's not on you. You left them in good hands. George C. Brown, across from Station 8 on Lee Street. That was a pretty good sized fire we had. Was out there all night long, freezing, rain falling and stuff like that. And you turn out gear, be iced up. Carolina Theater fire, I was off duty. Me and my brother-in-law were playing tennis at the time, and we saw the smoke and stuff. So we went downtown, and at that time, I don't know about now, but at that time, if a fireman showed up, he'd probably try to help pull hose or change air packs, stuff like that. And I had on shorts and a t-shirt, and one of the battalion chiefs told me to take somebody else's turnout gear and go inside. And that was, when we went inside, it was dark, smoky, and they didn't know if there was other people in there or not. And as it turned out, there was a lady that lost her life that had been there, and probably 25, 30 people had walked right by her, but not able to find her because of the debris that had fell and the smoke. 9/11, when that took place, I remember exactly where I was at, Southport, North Carolina, painting a house. I wasn't a firefighter at that particular time. I'd already retired. And seeing those firemen continually go inside the building, knowing that more than likely they wouldn't come out, or but it's still the dedication that the guys were doing their jobs. They were bringing more units, kept coming in. But in my opinion, 9/11 is what made the fire department be a cool job to have, not a fun job. But the people that died years before that were just as much of a hero as the guys on 9/11, whether it was in Mississippi or Alabama or wherever. It just wasn't recognized back then. And so the magnitude of the police, fire, EMS, I mean, at ballparks all over the place, they were having firemen, policemen, EMS workers, bringing them in, saluting them, and it became a recognized job, that it wasn't just the old guys sitting around playing jokes on people. It was a job that was really hard to deal with, seeing somebody jump out of a burning building because they didn't want the fire to get them and they knew they was going to die, but I guess their thoughts was that they would might live jumping, and they knew they wasn't going to, being in there. People that I looked up to on the fire department, Steve Faust was a high school friend of my two sisters, and I went to school with his sister. And when he came on, or he was already on, and when I worked around him and stuff, I learned some of the things that, his military ways of doing things, and the standing up for himself. We were at a 2-company station, and I had a captain that was set in his ways, and Steve was the new captain, and he was going to run his station. And run his crew. And, you know, you had to learn to stand up for yourself, whether you were the experienced guy or the younger guy. Harold Hall was a good friend, and he was a firefighter that I knew from going to school with my two sisters. And so, but Steve Faust probably was one of the more influential. A.C. Farmer was one of the captains that I didn't necessarily admire, but I probably learned more from him about being an officer than anybody else. Some of the most heartbreaking things that I ever had to do as a firefighter is to pick up a 16-month-old baby, arms and legs burnt pretty much to a crisp and dead, carry them out. Picking up people at a house fire, picked up a guy by his legs and the meat came off in my hand. And that stuff lives with you. You know, it's not an ever night thing, but it's things that make you realize that our job is serious, and you have to you have to enjoy what you're doing and realize that you just seen something really bad, but the next thing might be something very good that you, positive attitude to keep, you know. Proudest moment was the day that Chief Powell slid the captain's badge across the table to me, because about a year and a half prior to that, I had got put on probation for a year. Nothing that I'm proud of on that point, but he's the same one that put me on probation, and he's the same one that promoted me. And I always told everybody on my company all my story of what happened, how I got there, and how you could get out of it. So, you know, I tried to use myself as an inspiration to, I had guys laugh at me while I was studying for the captain's exam. And I said, after I got promoted, then they said, dang, if you can do it, anybody can. And, you know, hey, if that's what it takes to motivate them. I would go back in a heartbeat, probably keep my mouth a little quieter at times, and that wouldn't be me then if I did that. But I wouldn't change anything about my career. I loved it. I loved being with the camaraderie that I've still got people that I've known for over 40 years and been good friends with them, go on vacations with them, do things, and it's just, you know, a blessing, the friendships that you have. I was in the Army for 3 years, and like I say, I went in at 17 and got out at 20. I didn't go to Vietnam, but I was on a troop ship headed for Vietnam with 10,000 troops. We wound up spending 19 months in Okinawa, and but never had to do battle. Gail, my wife, was probably the most instrumental person in my career. She supported me as far as being a firefighter, supported the job, and running the house when you're not there, and 2 teenage boys. You know, there was, you know, always something going on, and I admire the job that she did. Respect that, and thank her very much. And Jeff and Joy, if you're listening to this sometime or another, I'm very proud of you, Mom. If I had the opportunity to speak to a training class or any firefighters, individuals, I did speak to a couple of classes when Chris Bowman was training officer. And first thing I asked them, had any of them ever played sports? Most of them raised their hand. Have you ever been involved in any kind of athletics at all? And then, you know, did you serve in the military? So once you realize that about 90% of them have, then they're used to being a team. And I told them that the basketball team, the football team, baseball, whatever, those 4 or 5 guys on the fire truck is the same team. And you have to follow instructions, you have to do your job, know what's on the truck, where it's at, and how to use it. That's the bare minimum every day. And it'll be a rewarding job if they put their mind to it and excel. I'm proud of the fact that I served my country at 17. Whatever came my way, I was fortunate enough not to have to go to battle, but I was there, I was available. I was blessed by being on the fire department, working with the best group of guys that anybody could ask for. After I retired, I was lucky enough to get a job doing EMS. I did flight communications for helicopters going out on 911 calls, medical emergencies, critical care transports. I did that at 2 hospitals in North Carolina for 17 years. So with the 3 years in the Army, 30 on the fire department, and 17 there, that's 50 pretty good years of dedication and serving my country, serving my community. And I'm proud of that. And just blessed to have all the people in my life that I have.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.